Welcome everyone to the Geeky Gaming Guild. This is Caleb. I would greatly appreciate if you guys enjoy the content that you like, comment, subscribe, share with your friends. So today's main topic is it is Infinity Week on Tabletop, and we have a lot of new information about N5 from Corvus Belli. If you haven't went over and checked out that video yet, if you're not kind of in the know on that, go check out the OnTabletop YouTube channel or their website, and you guys can see what I'm talking about and what I'm going to be referencing today. I would definitely give it a watch. It's definitely worth your time. So I'm going to go ahead and recap and give you my commentary on the big talking points that they went over in today's video. So, like I said, lots of news, lots of big stuff. So we had already been told a tentative date of when N5 will drop, and Carlos mentioned that again in the video today, that on November 18th is when they're expecting the PDF and free-to-access versions for the N5 rules will come out. We now know what armies will be in N5, so that's one of the big news reveals from today. They shared with us how guided missiles are changing. We now know how close combat and stats that are over 20 will work. We have seen the new martial arts table. We now know about some new mechanics in the game, such as supply drops and some new skills. And then we've seen how a pretty important skill from N4 will be different in N5. And then our final talking point today, and probably one of the biggest ones, will be the new fire team rules. So let's go ahead and get into the good stuff. And I say good stuff, but begrudgingly, because some of you will not enjoy this talking point, and that is what armies are gone and what armies stayed. So, Pan-Oceania and Ariadna obviously took the biggest losses in the reveal today. Pan-Oceania is losing Varuna, NCA, and Shock Army as sectorials. They will continue to have military orders and the Winter Force, and then their new KCF from the Sandtrap box. As a player who has not played Pan-Oceania before Sandtrap, I'm intending to start KCF moving forward. I feel really bad for the players who thought they were safe with Varuna because it was not out of catalog. So I feel very bad for some of my local players who played that, but they will adapt. They have other armies, but I definitely feel for them. I'm really glad that I did not go ahead and start a Shock Army like I had intended to originally. I ended up deciding to start Steel Phalanx as my second army, and so dodged a bullet there, but we'll see how things go for Pano moving forward and how they will adjust to not having those sectorials around anymore. Ariadna, I feel like the changes there were pretty predictable. All they lost were the sectorials that were already out of catalog, so I feel like for the most part that one's not too bad, doesn't cut as deep. The fact that they're keeping USARF, Cosmoflot, and TAC makes sense. Those are their sectorials that have action packs similar to the ones that were stayed around for Pan-Oceania. That seemed to be a theme. One of the surprising things that stayed for me was QK, Kapukalki. So they've stayed pretty true to the fact that moving forward they don't really want armies to have more than 3 sectorials, and that appeared to be one of the big patterns behind how they decided what to cut and what to keep. And adding Kapukalki back into Hakislam's main sectorials means that they have 3, and that keeps up with the other main factions. So makes sense. Toha, fortunately, is sticking around. I'm really glad that they are. They're one of my favorite armies aesthetically. I'm glad to see them keeping on into N5. Obviously, one of the big changes to NA2 is that JSA is now a full-fledged actual faction now with 2 sectorials and a vanilla version as well. That's going to be really fun. One of my local players that I enjoy playing with quite a bit is a hardcore JSA player, and he's definitely looking forward to trying out these different variants. In terms of other NA2 factions we are losing, we are losing Starco, Foreign Company, and Spiral Corps, although Spiral Corps will primarily live on through Toha. The factions that remain relatively unchanged are Yujing, Combined Army, Aleph, and O12. Those armies kept all of their current sectorials from N4 moving into N5. Now, side note, Aleph is expected to lose the Team Achilles members as they are defected to the Combined Army, but they did keep their 2 sectorials, so that is why I listed them in the unchanged. So this slide here either cut really deep or it's very exciting to you. So I'd love to get your comments down below of your thoughts on what's staying and going. But we're going to go move on to our next talking point today, and that is guided missiles. Is it a nerf or is it not? I will let you guys decide in the comments. In my opinion, I'm fairly neutral. I feel like this was a good way to change guided missiles without removing it from the game. I feel like if you remove guided missiles from the game, you remove a way for armies that struggle into mimetism and high modifier sectorials and factions that you don't have otherwise. And I also think that it would be really a big hit to the offensive game plan of some of the nomad lists like Tunguska that you see. And if that wasn't an option anymore, I definitely think that would, in my opinion, be a bad thing for the game. I like that they've added in a new defensive way to get around guided missiles, and what they've done is made it where if you roll a successful willpower reset check against a guided missile attack in ARO, you remove the targeted state. And I think that's a pretty big change, and I think it's a good change. It's going to make guided missiles be a little more order inefficient. It's going to make them be a little easier to avoid, but still relevant. And so I think, in my opinion, I think it's going to be an okay change. But again, would love to hear your thoughts down below. All right, let's get into the close combat and the melee changes. For me, when learning the game of Infinity, close combat was one of the most confusing things to me. And so, combined with my current level of experience in the game and then these new changes, I think in N5 that close combat is going to be a little bit easier to understand, in my personal opinion. So now, if I have a close combat stat of over 20, so let's say, for example, I have a close combat specialist, his close combat stat is 23. Now, instead of adding to my dice roll to figure out what his roll is, I will be changing the critical hit range. So let's say I have a CC stat of 23. I would now crit on a 20, a 1, a 2, or a 3. And so for me, I think that makes a lot of sense because with how we've already been seeing that armor saves are changing and how possibility of survival is replacing the damage statistic, I think this is a good change. I think it's going to reinforce that target number or below rolling system that I really already love about Infinity, and I think it's going to make it a little easier to learn how that works. Now, with that being said, let's talk about how these critical hit changes come up on the new martial arts table. So now martial arts has some changes and some things that stayed the same. From what I noticed, it looks like our modifiers are the same as they were, with one huge difference. Instead of having damage bonus modifiers for the martial arts skill, now we have additional burst and pseudo burst. So let me explain what I mean by that. So now when you get up to level 3 on the martial arts table, you roll an extra dice and then drop a dice result of your choice. This is not just a roll an extra dice and drop the lowest, because with how critical hits work now, if I have let's use that example I used earlier, where if I have a CC stat of 23 and I'm critting on a 20, a 1, a 2, or a 3, if I roll a 12 and a 1, I'm going to keep the 1 so I can get a critical and cancel out my opponent's result, assuming they don't get a higher crit than me. So I definitely think it's going to add a lot more mind games and a lot more decision into dice rolls that we keep versus drop, especially when it comes to how this will work in close combat. With level 4, now you just get a pure +1 dice, so you go from burst 1 to burst 2, assumingly in melee combat. And then at level 5, you get 2 extra dice, dropping a result of your choice. Rolling 3 dice in close combat just sounds wild to me, so I definitely think that's going to be a fun mechanic to mess with. All right, so love to get your thoughts on the changes to martial arts and how critical hits are going to work with stats above 20. Let's go ahead and move on to our next talking point. So now, let's get into kind of some of the new things that are going to be included in N5. So Speedball is the name of the new, like what I'm calling like the supply drop mechanic, and that's where you can spend a command token to drop in 2 supply drops, basically, that are called it's going to take some getting used to for me to call that speedballs. I don't quite know the reference that was used in the interview video today. So you're able to pick a piece of equipment that's in one of the speedballs, and then the other is determined at random. But one of the big things that was pointed out by Carlos in the video is that you're not going to be dropping in a weapons. It's going to be other kinds of equipment. So unfortunately, you're not going to drop in a free HMG to throw on your trooper, but you're still going to get things that are relevant. So, well, I hope this ends up being a cool change to the game. I'm looking forward to it myself. We now know what 2 of the new skills that were shown on the sand trap profiles are, and then we also know what the new version of Sixth Sense will look like. So I'm going to go ahead and actually talk about jet propulsion first, because that's like the totally new skill. It's basically in the same ballpark as things like super jump, except for what's happening is someone with jet propulsion can elevate and then drop back to where they started. And I believe it's intended to be almost like a free movement to do. I'll need a little bit more clarification so that I don't misinterpret, but I do think it could be a really cool mechanic to have on troops that have like a jetpack or that are like a drop troop. Definitely think it's going to be an interesting addition to the game. Combat Instinct and Sixth Sense I would like to talk about together because previously they were the same thing. In N4, Sixth Sense included what is now called Combat Instinct as part of its bonus. So Combat Instinct is now a model's ability to ignore surprise attacks from a defensive perspective. And what is now Sixth Sense is just the ability to ignore minuses to dodging when you're dodging an attack out of line of sight, and then also ignoring minuses to shooting back at someone who's shooting you through a low visibility zone at a -6. So I definitely think that that's going to be an interesting addition. I think it's weird that they broke it up that way, but we'll see how it goes. Definitely think that this is kind of a minor example of the opposite of trying to fix rules bloat, but we'll see how it goes. Interested to see how it plays out. One of the big things about Sixth Sense is that it used to be one of the fire team bonuses for having a 4-man pure team. So let's go ahead and lead that right into the new fire team rules for N5. And this is going to be our last major talking point for this video. Man, oh man, are fire team rules different now. So now instead of having my fire team rules have 2 separate bonus charts based off purity and then also how many members are in my fire team, we're going to be taking a look at your bonuses are derived from what level of purity you have in your fire team. So we're looking at guys that are the actual profile that is allowing you to play that fire team as well as the counts as troopers. So, for example, if I have a fire team of 4 Fusiliers and Richard Quinn, that would still be a 5-man pure fire team. But if I have a fire team of 1 Fusilier and 4 other fire team members that do not count as Fusiliers, then I would only be getting level 1 purity bonuses. And that's pretty crazy because normally we would get a generic 5-man fire team bonus from that, and that is no longer a thing. So now, moving forward, if you have a purity count of 1 in your fire team, your entire fire team moves and activates together. If you have a purity level of 2, you get that pseudo +1 burst that we saw in close combat, where you get an extra dice but take 1 out. We have, for level 3 of purity, this is where things get really interesting in my opinion. Like in N4, you get the +3 to discover whip rolls like we did with a 3-man pure fire team with the old rules. But now you also get +1 to dodge rolls. This is a new bonus that we did not see in N4. So now if I have a 3-man pure Harris team, they get an extra dice, albeit 1 removed. They get the +3 to discover and +1 to dodge. So I definitely see where Carlos was coming from when he was explaining that we get stronger duo and Harris teams, but not quite getting there on the 4-man and 5-man core teams. So let's get into why the 4-man and 5-man teams actually got a nerf. So now if you have level 4 purity in your fire team, all you benefit is +1 ballistic skill across the team. we no longer have a way to access +3 ballistic skill from fire teams now. That is going to be a huge change in list building and how we decide what goes into a fire team, because now we don't quite get the same level of benefits from having a big fire team as opposed to like a middle ground 3-man, 2 to 4-man team. So now if I have a 5-man pure core link, I get team-wide 6th Sense in its new iteration. That definitely feels like a downgrade to having a 5-man pure link compared to N4, because now instead of getting that +3 ballistic skill bonus, we're getting what we used to get from the 4-man pure link. I definitely think this is going to be an interesting change, and for players like me and playing an army like Imperial Service where 3-man Harris teams was kind of what they did well anyway, I don't think this is going to necessarily impact me in a negative way. But for some armies that relied really heavily on those really, really strong 5-man and 4-man core links, like with Steel Phalanx, like with a core team out of something like a Morad Aggression Force, I definitely feel like they're going to be hurting from these changes. So I'm going to be very intrigued to see how people adapt. We'll go into more in depth on fire team compositions and how this will affect our list building whenever we get more information about rosters and point costs and things like that in N5. But I wanted to go ahead and discuss this with you guys as soon as possible because I think this is some crazy big news. With that being said, I'd love to get your initial thoughts and reactions to the new fire team rules, as well as all the things I've discussed in the video up to now today. Feel free to drop those in the comments. Let's go ahead and take a look at a couple other last thoughts before I let you go today. Moving forward, some content I'm going to be providing is I'm going to be doing at least one more recap over the news shared during Infinity Week. I will be sharing more information about my local meta as requested in the previous comments on the first video. I definitely am reading those comments and would love for you guys to continue giving me more feedback and more input. I'm going to be sharing my own army projects in an upcoming video. I will be sharing my Imperial Service army as well as my new army project, my Steel Phalanx that I began painting. And then I'm also going to be discussing with you guys my plans for moving into N5 and what I want to do with the channel. Definitely planning to put in a lot of beginner-friendly content, but as well as keeping up with the stuff for the more experienced players and the more knowledgeable players as well. I want to have something for everybody that enjoys Infinity. So would love to get your thoughts, and if you enjoyed the video today, please like, comment, subscribe, share with your friends, and then also if you've listened to me this long, please listen to this as well. If you want to learn more about the game, I definitely would check out these other sources. Check out the Infinity Gamer YouTube, Robert Shepard YouTube, the Whip 12 podcast, the Dice Gods Wargaming YouTube, as well as OnTabletop, and definitely go support them for giving us this opportunity to have this awesome Infinity Week content related to N5. If you feel free to ask questions in the comments or to go check these guys out if you'd like more information about them, but these are the sources that I go to when I want to learn more about a faction or more about the game. So thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you next time.